everybody, and welcome. Welcome to our presentation today, Implementing Applied Epic's Renewals Manager in Your Agency. My name is Eleni Lepo, and I'm the Marketing Director here at KiteTechnology. Also joining me is Lauren Roberts, and she's the Director of Agency Consulting and your presenter today. We were thrilled to see such a great response to this webinar and are so glad that so many of you are joining us. We're hoping that today's content is going to let you get started with Renewals Manager right away. So for those of you joining us that may not know who KiteTechnology is, we are a managed IT service provider and consulting firm, and we specialize in serving independent insurance agencies across the country. We've been around for almost 30 years now, and what sets KiteTech apart from other IT providers is our expertise with insurance. Many of our staff have worked in agencies in the past, and so that gives us that extra insight to know what agencies like yours need to be successful and operate at a high level. Our agency consulting team focuses on helping agencies use Epic more effectively and getting the most from all the features that are available. Renewals Manager is a great example of that. We find that many agencies do underutilize Epic and are just not taking advantage of everything that it has to offer. So we love helping you make better use of Epic and getting more from your investment. Our IT services are also listed here. We do provide comprehensive IT services as well as partner IT for those agencies that already have internal IT staff. You can see some of the things that we do listed here. So if you'd like to learn more about what we do and how we can help, please feel free to send us a question in the chat and then we'll reach out to you. We also will share a Calendly link in the follow-up email, and so that's another way that you can schedule a follow-up appointment if you'd like. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Lauren, and I will see you all a little later for questions.
Hello, everyone. So nice to see, as Eleni said, so many familiar faces on our webinar today. I know I can't physically see your faces, but it's nice to know that you guys are joining. Hope you guys get a lot of good information out of our webinar today. As Eleni mentioned, I am the Director of Agency Consulting here at KiteTechnology, and I also have worked in insurance in the past. I worked in an agency as an accounting administrator, also did life and health work, commercial line servicing, and all of the things. So, that does, as Eleni said, give us a little bit of an advantage as far as helping you in your agency and helping you utilize Epic better. I assist agencies with accounting support as well as migration from Applied Epic, from another database over to Applied Epic. And we also do lots of Epic optimization. So I assist agencies who are just wanting to, as Eleni said earlier, make better use of their Applied Epic system and take it to the next level. So with all that being said, I am going to go ahead and get started with our agenda today. So today we're going to go over a couple of things as far as the Renewals Manager is concerned. The key benefits, of course, how Renewals Manager is going to help you in your agency. I will go over how you can configure the Renewals Manager to better be used within your agency as well, because as we know, Epic is highly configurable and customizable, so we'll be able to give you some tips on how to make the decisions for your agency. And then we'll also talk about implementation of Renewals Manager and how to use that for your own staff. Go over a couple of next steps, just a few reminders as you start using it. And as Eleni mentioned, I will try to answer some questions throughout our webinar today, but we do have a lot of information to get through. We'll also answer some questions at the end as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into what some of the key benefits are of using Renewals Manager in your agency. So I want to talk to you a little bit first about what your traditional renewals management might look like. Many agencies will use expiration reports. You might be sending those out 120 days prior to expiration, or 90 or 60 or 45. You're sending them out in some way, shape, or form. And there are two different criteria for those reports in Epic. You can either look at all of the upcoming expirations, including policies that have been renewed, or you can exclude policies that have been renewed in Epic. But the definition of renewed in Epic from that criteria means it's either been renewed by download or it's been renewed by using the Actions Renew button on your screen. Now, some of the things that could be a challenge with that are that once you initiate that renewal to get your renewal activity and start the process, that's really just the start of the process. So it's going to fall off of that report when you click Actions Renew, but that really doesn't give you an accurate picture of the policies that have been renewed. If you wanted to find out what really is the process for that policy at that point, you'd have to, of course, go to the client's account, access the policy, and then access the activities and any supporting documentation that's listed there. We also know some agencies might use things like external spreadsheets to track all of their renewals, taking notes and sharing that document throughout the agency. And we really like to keep everything in Epic as much as possible. So while those spreadsheets might be good for everybody because they can see that information, it's not being tracked all in Epic. And that's what our goal is with the Renewals Manager. So with the Renewals Manager, some of the key differences are going to be that you can paperlessly manage your renewals all within Epic. So you have this nice dashboard that is included with your Epic database. It's not something that you have to request or load. As long as you've been keeping up to date with your updates, it should be there for you to access anytime. So you'll have paperless management of those. No need to take notes externally, on an expiration report or in a spreadsheet. Everything's going to be right there in a dashboard view. You'll have the real-time updates of the renewal process in that dashboard based on when your users, of course, are updating that information. And of course, it's also a really great benefit to management who might want to see what's going on. If you have a team of 10, 20, 30 account managers, it's hard to track down what's going on all of their different renewal processes. And so what this does is this allows you to search and filter by a certain account manager and see where they're really at. So rather than having to go into the account, access the activities, or email them and say, hey, what's going on? You should be able to quickly see just by their renewal stage where they're at in that process. So if, for example, if they've put a policy into the marketing stage, because we're going to try to remarket and move this to a different carrier before renewal, if that's still in marketing stage and it's only a couple of days away from expiration, it's probably going to throw up a little bit of a red flag to say, hey, are we binding coverage? Do we have coverage? What's really going on here? And so it does give your management that ability to kind of stay on top of things and see what's happening as a whole in the agency for the renewals processes. And of course, producers often want to know kind of where you're at and what's going on in their renewal process as well. So they might also want to access the Renewals Manager just to see where you're at and what's going on. So again, it's just really nice, one place to see everything there. And of course, as an account manager, you don't have to take notes externally. You can just go to one dashboard and see where am I at? What really needs to be managed today and taken care of today? Now, all of this is in conjunction with the existing use of your open activities and things that you need to follow up on. This is just an additional support to show what the actual stage is of your renewal without having to open up that activity in detail. So moving forward, some of the other benefits of the Renewals Manager, of course, that you're going to reduce some of the E&O exposures that may come from just basing your renewed policies off of your expiration report. Because as I mentioned earlier, initiating that renewal in Epic just puts it in process. Unless you complete the process, you move through the stages in the service summary row from in process to submitted to issued. That's really your only other identification in Epic, as well as the closed or open activities. We have unfortunately heard those horror stories where Someone has been managing the renewals by their expiration report, and they said, well, they started it, so it fell off the report, but it didn't get bound. And we didn't know that it wasn't in another process. And so claim happened. It's just, nobody wants to hear or have those stories. So Renewals Manager is really going to help you kind of stay on top of that and give them that information that's needed to make sure that you're continuing through the process. There are multiple views and filters that we'll go through today. I'm going to actually walk you through how you can customize your own Renewals Manager dashboard for either your specific role or department, date ranges, and other things like that. And you can still include the Renewals Manager stage on your expiration report. So I'm not saying we got to ditch the expiration reports altogether. There is a neat new feature in Epic when the Renewals Manager came along, where you can actually add the Renewals Manager stage to an expiration report. On the note of reports, before I get into our next configuration, there are some new reports that are available from Applied. It's a new report pack that you can request. And there is actually an expiration report in there with the layout that includes that stage that I was just mentioning. So if you don't have that yet, you can contact Applied, just send in a ticket to support, and they'll get that loaded in your database for you. Okay, so let's go over the fun stuff. So configuring Renewals Manager for your agency. Now, if you don't have Epic up right now, again, this webinar is recorded, so you can come back and watch this stuff anytime. But if you do want to follow along, this will be a good time to jump into Epic and follow along as well. So the first thing I like to talk about when we get to Renewals Manager stages is, what do we want our Renewals Manager stages to be? You really want to configure these based around, what do you need to see in the process? Do you need to see if the person's getting new information? Are you marketing? Are you quoting? Do you have a quote? Do you have a proposal? So what are those key points throughout the renewal that you want to be able to track? What are the items that tell you really where they're at in the process without going into an enormous amount of detail? The pre-configured renewal stages that are in Epic out of the box might not work for you. So it is a good idea to kind of go through and see what's there. I'm going to give you some examples, of course, today of some things that you might want to have as your own renewals stages or Renewals Manager stages. So we'll go through some tips there for you. They are totally customizable, as I mentioned. It's not a, choose the drop-down box and pick the stage that you want. You can label the stage whatever it is that you prefer. So something to keep in mind there. Once you configure it, and this is one of the next steps in the end as well, but once you configure your Renewals Manager stages, something to keep in mind is it's great to have a kind of a cheat sheet for your users as well. So if you want to further define and just get them familiar with what the stages are and what they mean to the agency management, that's a good idea to just kind of lay those out, show them how the Renewals Manager stages are going to work, and let them know when they should be appropriately used. Another thing to keep in mind is Renewals Manager stages are not necessarily in order in every situation. Your renewals are going to be different from one department to another, from one department within a department to another. You could have downloaded policies versus non-downloaded, automatic renewals versus this is going to take me the full 90 days to get it done. So the stages themselves don't have to go in order. And you'll kind of see that as we look through some of the example stages that you can have. You could go from the renewal hasn't started all the way to I got the policy, I updated in Epic, and it's done. So it's really just kind of dependent on where you're at in the process. Doesn't have to be, this is the first thing I did, this is the second thing I did, this is the third thing I did. And so that's something to keep in mind, just as we're looking through the stages and what's available to you. Okay. So I see that I have a couple questions, probably a good pausing point. Quick couple questions. I'll just answer a few of these real quick. Question is this a separate module through Applied? Yes, it is, but it is in your Applied system already. So I will show you that as soon as we jump over into configuration. Is it possible to walk us through a renewal, starting with the renewals manager process step by step? I will give you kind of an idea of that and where you can change the renewals manager stages. What was the name of the report to call Epic to have them load? If you contact Applied and ask them for the audit report pack, that is what you are looking for. And when you get those reports in layouts, they'll have little stars at the end of them, and a lot of them actually have the word audit in them. But there are some, like a new business and a lost business and the expiration report, that just have stars in the title to tell you that, hey, these are the new reports. And the question that the renewals that have already been done already, they're still on the list. We'll explain that as well. Good questions. And some of the other questions I see here we'll also answer in just a couple of slides. So you guys have some great questions already today. This is going to be a good session. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward into some examples of stages that might be useful to your agency. Again, these are not all necessary for your agency. Just wanted to kind of give you some ideas of what might be useful as renewal stages. Some other things I want you to keep in mind is the configuration options for the renewals manager stages themselves. To answer a question that kind of was asked a minute ago, the renewal itself doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the renewals stage. So the renewals manager really is meant for the account manager to identify what stage they're in. So as you're working your renewal, you will be the one as an account manager or a CSR, account executive. I know we have lots of cool titles. That person that's managing the renewals process is the one that's going to move the policy through the stage. So it is an extra step, so to speak, for you to identify what stage you're in. Some other things to keep in mind are that these stages can be configured to either keep the policy in your renewals manager dashboard or remove the policy from your renewals manager dashboard. So for example, if the renewal hasn't been started, we might leave those policies in the dashboard for up to 30 days. So if I've not moved the stage from renewal hasn't been started to something else, it might just stay in that dashboard, depending on your configuration choices, for at least 30 days, so we can see if there were any missed renewals or any policies that just weren't, the stage just didn't get changed on. Personal lines will be a little bit different, so keep an ear out for that. There is a specific filter for personal lines because the majority of your business is going to be a downloaded book. So you're not going to manually change the stage on every single policy. I don't want you to think that you're going to have to do that. Your view, once we get over to the dashboard and configure that and customize it, will actually exclude renewed policies. So for personal lines, things are a little bit different when we look through the renewals manager. Personal lines might want to exclude policies that have already been renewed by download and only use this process for monitoring manual renewals or maybe something that hasn't actually come through download that should have. So personal lines is going to use it a little bit different from the commercial lines department. So do keep that in mind as we're working through this. It does seem to be geared a little bit more towards commercial lines because you have a longer renewal process. You know, you might reach out to the client and say, hey, client, you know, there's a policy renewal coming up. We got lots of equipment scheduled and vehicles and drivers and all this stuff. Can you let me know if there's any changes or updates? And you go back and forth for a little bit. You might be marketing and need loss runs. And so you've got quite a bit more of an intricate process. Whereas personal lines might get that downloaded policy, check, make sure everything's good. Hey, client, good to see you. Thanks for being a good customer. And that's it. So the process is going to be a little bit different. So do be thinking about that. So once we get to customizing, I'll show you guys how to switch your view depending on what department you're in. So back to the stages then. Some of the examples that I have here for you are things that you might want to track or manage from the renewals manager stage. So renewals not started is a pretty good place to start. If the renewal has not been started yet, it would be in this stage. And I have in this configuration, it would be there for 30 days for management or yourself or whoever to see that that renewal didn't get started in the system. So that would, where we might use an old expiration report for that, that might be considered a missed renewal. You might also want something like pending non-renewal. Oftentimes I hear that agencies get these non-renewals in advance of the renewal saying, hey, your roof's 50 years old, you got to replace it or we're going to non-renew you. So you might have a situation where you're pending non-renewal and you want to keep an eye on that on the renewals manager, because you know that you're going to have to market that, stay on top of the client and say, hey, you got to go get this done. There's lots of other situations where that might happen, but that's a good example of a pending non-renewal. Updated information requested. That would be good for, like I said, checking with the client. Hey, do you have anything new in a discovery type phase? And then you have marketing, of course. Once you've decided that you're going to remarket that policy, it's gone either to your marketing manager or you're marketing it as an account manager. That's where you would want to kind of move into that stage. So you can see here that you might go from, I might go straight from renewal not started directly to marketing. I might already have everything updated. There's no changes. So I'm just going to go from one down to another. Again, you don't have to really go step by step with these stages. New broker or carrier quote received. Maybe once you've actually got the new quotes, then you want to put it over in that stage while we're in the process of maybe creating that proposal. Now, one thing I want to point out on some of these stages that are after the renewals not started is those stages I would have configured to remain indefinitely. So if you put a policy in the marketing stage of your renewals process, it's going to stay in Renewals Manager indefinitely. If it's 6 months from the expiration and you never took it out of marketing, it's still going to be in your Renewals Manager, because your process should have been that you marketed and it either canceled, we lost the business, or you renewed or rewrote that policy to reflect the correct renewal stage. So you do have to get to one of the end stages in order to completely get the renewal out of your Renewals Manager. Again, unless you have excluded your renewed policies. For personal lines. Maybe small commercial too, that might be, depending on their level of download and what your process is. It's all dependent on how your agency works. A couple more examples for you. Renewal pending payment. I know oftentimes, I'm down here in North Carolina, so I'm familiar with these coastal policies where you've got a flood policy and they're not going to renew it until you pay the bill. Or maybe it's a surplus lines type policy and they're not going to renew it until you pay the bill. So this is a good stage that I found is beneficial to some of those agencies that have a good volume of those policies. Renewal quote received. Maybe you've received the quote, just need to present it to the client and update the system, or the policy received. Renewal quote, I know happens a lot with your progressive policies. You're going to have that RWQ policy in your system for a little bit before it gets paid and renewed. Just jumping around a little bit here, renewal policy received. This might be a good example of, I got the policy, I need to update Epic. It's just an automatic renewal, but I haven't finished doing that process yet. So that's a good example of how you could use that one. Proposal quote to clients, pretty self-explanatory. And then these last two that I have here would be examples of the last stage. So it's either renewed or rewritten to another carrier, or they're not renewing, we lost the business, or they canceled, or they moved out of state, whatever the case is. Regardless, it's going to be gone from Renewals Manager because there's nothing else to do. So those last two stages are pretty important. You want to have stages of some sort to indicate that, okay, we're done. This is all set. Nothing left to do on this process. So you can see there's a lot of different options here, and I come up with new ones every once in a while. This is something that it's not a set in stone process right away. You might start with a few stages and then say, you know what, I bet I could use a renewal stage for that. So it's something that you can just be thinking about as far as what your agency needs are and what you want to manage, what you want to track as a part of your renewals process. The next thing that we're going to do is going to be configuration. I do see that I have several questions, so I'm going to pause for just a second because I just probably answered a few. So let's see what we've got. Let's go to our questions here. Question from Judy, let's see. Can there be stages set up for commercial, personal, and employee benefits, or are the stages same regardless of the department? That is a wonderful question. The stages are going to all show up in the same place. However, you could indicate by way of a C, a P, or a B in your Renewals Manager stage that these are the stages you need to pick from. I'll show you when we configure the stages, you can move them around in the order that you want them to actually show up in the drop-down box. So you could group together, theoretically, a section of C stages, P stages, and B stages or EB stages based on that information. Good question, I like that one. Can you turn off the Renewals Manager for a particular carrier or line of business? No, you cannot. You could filter them out in your Renewals Manager screen, but you cannot turn it off for a specific one. It's going to pull in everything based on how you customize your screen, which we'll take a look at. Can the download change the Renewals Manager stage when it downloads the renewal? Also a fantastic question, and no, it cannot. It is, I will show you some options within the Renewals Manager settings and events and setup. But really you would not have download changing that. You would just exclude the policies that had already been renewed in order to get rid of the downloaded policies. Is there a way to search only commercial and personal policies? Yes, stay tuned. However, one of our viewers also mentioned how to filter that out. I'll show you in the examples as well, but yes, you will search by your department code beginning with C. Let's see, if you have account managers that do both commercial and personal, will they have two separate renewals managers? No, they can see it all in one place. And we'll do one more. Let's see, are those renewal stages, can the Renewals Manager stages be edited? Like have different stages from my examples? Absolutely. You can label it however you want. It's going to be completely up to your preference. And how to see prior, there's another question, how do you see prior dates in the Renewals Manager list as to go back for verification that it was done? You cannot. Once it has been removed from the Renewals Manager, you can't go backwards. And remember, it comes out either because your renewals not started timing expired, that 30 or 14 days, whatever you want to set that as, or you took it out because you said, all right, this is renewed or this was canceled. All right. Another good question, is there a way to wholesale change renewal stage for certain lines and carriers so it shows up in Renewals Manager as automatically renews so you just don't see it in Renewals Manager? No, that's a really cool idea. That would be really helpful. Could be something that would be in the future. I would definitely put that on the bright ideas for applied. Somebody should vote that up. Everybody on the call should just vote that up. That's pretty cool. All right, so grabbed a couple of those. We will definitely answer some more questions as we go through, but I do want to make sure that you get as much information today as possible. So let's keep it going. Okay, so in the next section, what we're going to do is we're going to dig into configure. So for those of you who may have access to configure in Epic, you can explore these areas with me, see how your setup is currently configured. And then you'll know kind of where to go to make any changes along the way. So configuration for your Renewals Manager actually starts with the policy. Renewals Manager settings and events are in the policy section of configure. But the first thing you want to do is determine when do you want the renewal to show up in Renewals Manager. And you do that in your policy configuration. So this is under configure, policy, and types. And then you'll have to select the number of how many days in advance you want those to show up in Renewals Manager. I'll show you a little bit more on how you can set your date range as well, but this is the first part of that. It has to actually be set to show up within a certain time frame in order for it to even show up in Renewals Manager for your date ranges. So here, another good best practice would be, determine for certain departments, certain types of policies might be a little bit further out. Some might be a little bit closer. Maybe your commercial lines is 90 or 120 days out. Maybe personal lines is more like 45 to 60 days out, just depending on how early they need to start that renewal process and what your agency procedure is. Just for real life, I'll give you the bigger screen here. I always get screenshots just in case Epic doesn't want to do what I need it to do, because this is a demo database. Here you'll go to configure and then down to the policy section, types. Just highlight and click edit on your policy to change that number. But I would determine, what days for what departments and what types of policies before you come in here and make any changes to that. As far as I can tell, with every Epic database I've been in so far, they're just defaulted to 90 days. But you can, of course, configure that more custom for your agency and do the differences based on department. Okay. The next thing we want to do is go into the actual Renewals Manager settings. So in Configure, Policy, and Renewals Manager settings, this is where you're going to get all the meat of the configuration for your stages and how you want things to act. So let's jump over into that in Epic. And that is going to be under Renewals Manager settings. Now, from the top of the screen here, I'm going to explain these two options. We have renewals visibility. Generally, agencies will kind of go with the display renewals for all employees and then let the employee filter down from there. So you would filter, if I had, a whole book that was personal and commercial, I could see and filter just to my specific book business. Or if I need to see a whole department, I could see a whole department. Or if I'm backing somebody up today, whatever the case is, the default is just you have access to all of the renewals that are available in the system. Now, that might sound a little scary for a security purpose, but the reason why I like the all option is because if you have some items that maybe don't have a servicing person on them because you've just migrated, maybe you've got some cleanup to do, those items are still going to show up in the Renewals Manager as long as you are able to view all employees. Some other things, any other type of cleanup process might hinder your ability to view renewals that you need to see and filter down to if you don't have the display all. But if you do want to kind of get a handle on that and make sure that you only have certain people viewing certain things, you can also filter it to just your own account managers, their own book, or that person's role, their information only their renewals, and then allow them to do view others. So if I was working with Eleni and Eleni had a week out and I needed to keep an eye out on her renewals while she's gone, my manager could go in and put, this week Lauren can view Eleni's renewals. It's the same setting that we have for viewing other activities in Epic. So in order to do that, I'm going to jump over here real quick. I did not have this window open, but I do want to point this out. So if you go over to the employee, I told you it was going to work a little slow. So I had all of these things open already. So give that just a second. There we go. Let's go into my employee account. And here is where I would go to the View Others tab. Getting a little ahead of Epic. And under View Others, I could add additional people. So if I needed to see someone else in the agency's activities, tasks, or workflows or renewals, I could add that person to the View Others. And this is, again, where you could also add the view of activities and tasks as well. Renewals will not show up here. It would show up right here in this area. It will not show up if you have View All selected in the previous screen. So View All, you don't get to pick here. If you do only View Others, then you have to select the Renewals Manager here. Okay. All right, so that's key as far as security is concerned. That's about the only secure issue or security question that's in the Renewals Manager. So next is going to be determining your stages. So here, based on one of the questions that was asked earlier, I do want to point out you have the up and down arrows. So if I said, you know what, I want proposal to client to be a little bit further up, I could just click the little arrow and move it around. So if you were wanting to do grouping by the C's, the P's, and the B's, you would just put them all together with the little arrows there, or just create them in order. Either way works fine. Here's where you would configure the way the policy acts once it's in a specific stage. So when a policy is entered in Epic, it would automatically, by this configuration, go into renewals not started stage. And it's going to be in that stage until renewal. And then at renewal, I would change the stage to wherever I'm at, to one of the other stages, start my process and move it around to whatever it needs to be in. So I have this stage to display policies in Renewals Manager that are in this stage based on when it'll show up from the configuration on the policy, 90 days. So the second layer to that is, how long do we want this policy that's in this stage to stay in Renewals Manager? So in this case, if the renewal just hasn't been started, I want to see it for at least 30 days. So if somebody didn't change the stage to something different, whatever it was supposed to be, or move it out, I want to see that on the Renewals Manager, because first off, we want to make sure that we didn't miss a renewal. And second, we want to make sure that folks are following the workflow and actually moving the policy to its accurate stage. So that's one of your options. Now on something like this, non-renewal pending, I have that to stay in the Renewals Manager indefinitely. So if you never change it to not renewing altogether or change it to something like policy renewed or rewritten, it's going to stay forever and ever and ever. So it's been missed. We missed the ball, something broke, or the stage didn't get properly changed to what it should have been. So that's going to be the case on all of these that are kind of in the middle stages, is what I like to call them. Anything that's a process that is pending, I like to leave those in that stage indefinitely. And then once it's complete, one of these last type stages, it would go to display. You could take it off completely. So you could uncheck this box that says, all right, once it's renewed, I don't need to see it anymore. Or you can leave it for a day. So if you have producers or management kind of following up to see that you did process a renewal or that it was canceled or lost business, then you could see that information for a day or so after. We obviously wouldn't really want to see those for very long, because we want to maintain what our current renewals are. To create a stage, all you have to do is click the add button, select your choices here, and as I said, type in whatever you want. You can choose one of these sample stages or make it your own, call it something completely different if you need to. So you just want to make sure that you kind of plan it out, determine what you want your stages to be, and then determine how you want them to act within that process. Okay. All right. And again, you can move those around. You can delete. If you do try to make a change to one of the existing stages that's there. So let me do this. I'm going to show you what this is going to look like. If I change the description on this, for example, let's call it renewal process not started. making any change, if I click finish, it's going to say, hey, all of the policies that are currently in this stage are going to change to this that you've just made the change on. So you are going to get that if you try to change the current stages that are in Epic. If nobody's using it, it really doesn't hurt. But if you want, you can just delete the stages that are there and then change, and then just add a whole new list of stages. Either way works perfectly fine. Okay. So I just showed you my next slide already. I'll pause on the slide for a second. I just went ahead and moved on into that in Epic. So this is just a little bit of the description on configuring where to go to configure those stages, decide which stages you want to use, and then determine how long you want to keep it in the Renewals Manager, if at all. Now, one of these next areas that is configurable, just want to kind of give you a fair warning on, is the Configure Policy Renewals Manager events. Now, while this might seem alluring, I want to caution you, you can tell Epic, hey, when a policy is canceled, go ahead and just update the stage to canceled. Well, we wouldn't really want to do that because the policy might actually get rewritten to another carrier. So we don't really want to change it to show that it's been lost, because it might have been rewritten to a different carrier. And that policy, canceled stage in the example that I gave means that it's truly canceled. It's lost business, it's gone. Policy created, I'll take you back to the defaults real quick. Policy created means that as soon as a policy is entered in Epic, it goes into that first stage. So whether it's a brand new policy from I renewed a policy, or it's a brand new policy from a rewrite, or a brand new policy from new business, that very first stage will always be renewal process not started. And it'll stay that for the life of the policy until it's time to renew. Policy renewed, I don't have that set to update the stage, because again, this is very basic configuration. There are no additional filters on this. So we can't say, if policy is renewed with X carrier, don't put that in the Renewals Manager stage. Or if policy is renewed by download, go ahead and put that in renewed stage. We can't really configure that more detailed. So we see that it's a little bit better to use the filters over on the dashboard itself than it is to have Epic automatically move anything to a different stage for you, because the purpose here, again, is really for the account manager or the user to be managing that renewal and tell Epic what stage they're in. It is not meant to be a fully automatic type process. Okay. Had to throw that one in there. That one's a little scary. I found one in a different configuration the other day, and it doesn't, if we look at this the way that we've just looked at everything and we know all of the things that we just learned, it doesn't really help to change the stage if the policy is renewed or canceled. We would want it to go into the specific status based on what's happened, because this policy renewed happens when you do actions renew. So that would be the same as the other process. Same thing with the canceled. Okay. All right, so let's get into how to actually use this product. So I want to now show you how to kind of configure this for yourself from the dashboard view so that you can see the information that is important to you and important to your specific role or department. So what we're going to do first is go through customizing your Renewals Manager. As with many of the different screens in Epic, you have a view option. And that view option up at the top of your Renewals Manager, and I will go to Renewals Manager, which you can get to by using your shortcut on the side up at the top, Renewals Manager, or you can go Home and Renewals Manager from there. Two different ways you can get there. So in the Renewals Manager, we can click the view to see a specific number of days in advance. Again, keeping in mind, it won't show up in Renewals Manager until the number of days that were determined at the policy level. I tend to keep all and then just sort by the date. If you want to be a little bit more specific, you can certainly do that, but renewals all is kind of my preference. Once you have selected your view, you'll also want to make sure that you select your filter. Now, the filter is going to give you lots of different options, and this area does have filter defaults. So in the example where I might just want to see my renewals and I've got access to everyone, I'm going to come down here and put in my servicing role, and I'm going to put in probably a, come on, begins with, I don't like equals. You can use equals if you like, but I might put it in a begins with, consulting, because that's my code in Epic. And if I were on any policies in Epic, it would filter to that. Or I might come over here and say, you know what, I'm a producer. I just want to see the policies that I'm the producer on. Then you could come down here to the producer broker code and pull in just your policies that you're a producer on. Lots of other things that you have down here. You could do work groups. You can also do specific agency codes if you have multiple agencies listed in your system, or branch. So this is good for kind of thinking from a management level. Or if you wanted to go to something along the lines of just a specific carrier. So you can, of course, kind of see that information here too. So there are lots of different options for what your filter can be. And remember that your filters in Epic can be compounded. So if I was that person that somebody had a question about earlier, that has both commercial and personal lines policies, I could put in myself as the CSR, filter to that. And then I could put in the department and filter to that. So if I just wanted to see my commercial lines renewals, I can filter to that. Or if I want to see all, back it out and just sort just by the CSR role, or filter just to the CSR role. So this is very helpful in kind of just setting up how you want your default view to be. If I'm maybe the commercial lines department manager, I just go to department code, begins with CO, and I'm just going to look for just the commercial lines policies. C code, not name. So once you do that, then that's going to update in a second and pull in that information. And there you go, just commercial policies. So I'm going to clear that out, but once you have filtered, I'll clear it in just a second after I show you the filter defaults. Once you have filtered it to what you want it to be, what you need to see, you want to come over here and click filter defaults, because this will change if you don't select your defaults. Very similar to your attachment screen or your transaction screen, have to select defaults. So just check the box and click OK. Okay. Another thing you want to do is you want to make sure that you have selected the specific columns that you need to see. Anytime you're selecting columns in any screen in Epic, you want to make sure that those columns have enough information so that maybe you don't have to open up that item to see what's inside. You can kind of manage it from here. So I've got a couple of different things that you probably don't have on your screen if you've never touched Renewals Manager before. I include things like the account code, name, line type, dates, of course, carrier information, what status is it in, was it new, rewrite, or renewal, bill mode, because we know some of those agency bills probably need to get grabbed a little bit further out, producer information, billed premium, entered by, financed, and of course, renewal stage. We want to be able to see that because we're kind of trying to manage that. There's lots of other options down here. These are just the preference that I've set into place based on how I like my screen set up. But I definitely encourage folks to go in and select the columns that you want to see on this screen, depending on your role. Now you'll notice the renewal stage on these is listed now over on the right-hand side. Got everything all set up. Remember, you can drag and drop your columns by just clicking on the header, move it wherever you want. And then of course, you'll notice I have a little chevron beside my header on the policy expiration date because I have it sorted by expiration date. They want to see the newest to oldest, I'll click it again, but right now I am just filtered to oldest to newest. So you can click that and swap it out if you want to. And then of course you have page numbers at the bottom. So if you do have that all selection, you can click on your arrows to go to the next ones in the list. There's also a little hover bar in the middle here that you can click and drag and make your list a little bit bigger. So again, just a very customizable screen here for you. Some other things in this screen that will help you out are going to be, and I just skipped through all of my slides, so you don't need those now that we've already gone over it in Epic. Some other things that you're going to need are going to be the tools at the bottom of the screen, which are fairly cool and also have been improved over time. You'll notice that down in the bottom you have associated activities that are open. You'll have the option to switch that view to all or closed as well. You also have claims open and all are closed as well in your view over here. Some other things to point out are you can go directly to the policy. So if I have this policy highlighted and I just want to go ahead and go right into that client screen, I can click on go to policy and it's going to take me right there. You can also, once you get in there goes slowly but surely. It's going to open up the application. I can go to my policies list if I want to do that. But that's just going to take me directly to the client, which is pretty neat. Some other things to note here is you do have a renew button in this screen. So if I have not initiated this renewal yet, this is the equivalent of actions renew. So you can actually initiate your renewal from this screen. And to do that, you can also highlight multiple policies using your shift key to highlight multiple items at one time and click the renew button or update renewal stage. So that's one thing that your shift key works for, either just renew or update the renewal stage as well. So you have two different options there for highlighting and attending to multiple items. You can also jump into a marketing submission. So if this is a commercial lines policy, you can go straight into the marketing submission and create a brand new one. I'm not going to click on that today, but that will take you to the marketing module. And then, of course, renewal stages. Now, when updating the renewal stage, it is going to bring you to a drop-down box of all of the stages other than the one that you're in. You can update, like I said, multiple policies at a time here. You can also update this from the policy screen itself. So if I'm over here on this policy screen, I can also click actions, update renewal stage. So you do not have to be in Renewals Manager to update the stage. I also just remembered looking at my personal people here. I did not show you how to exclude for the personal lines folks. If you are a personal lines person, account manager, whatever the case is, and you do not want to see renewed policies here, things that have already been done by download or things that are not manual policies, you can change this to renewed policies, defaults to exclude. When you click find, it's only going to show you what policies have not actually been renewed yet. So if I click find, it's going to take just one out of that list for me because I had one that I had already renewed to show you that. So sorry, pause for my personal lines folks real quick. All right. Some of the other tools down at the bottom of the screen, your activities will actually show you all of the activities on that expiring policy. So if you do closed or all, you can see everything and the last note entered. So if you had notes included on those activities, or maybe you have an open activity, then you'll be able to see that information here. And then also same thing on the claims. Most likely you'll have closed claims for the most part, but if you did have something listed down there, as you can see here, there's an open auto claim. You can open that up from here as well. This is great because you can see kind of what the life of the policy has been. So if there have been a lot of changes, additions, removals, you know, we might want to go and see what's going on there so that we know what to be prepared for at the renewal and with new premium and things like that. And then, of course, it's important to see what's actually open. So what's pending on this renewal before I go to start something else. Okay. Bonus tip, if you right click on that activity, you can do pretty much all of the things that you can do from your home screen activities. So if you are in here working Renewals Manager, you could go ahead and work your activity too if you see that something needs to be done there. Okay. All right, so let's jump through a couple of the other tools. Just got a couple slides here for you, examples of that information that we just went through. Got your open claims or closed claims to view that claims history. It will show downloaded claims too. So if your agency is downloading, you'll be able to see that as well. A couple of things I want to point out, and this is just a heads up in case you are recently migrated or standardizing your workflows, just something to kind of keep an eye out for, is that if the policy's service summary stage at renewal, just the renewal, not endorsements, is still in process, this policy is not going to show up in your Renewals Manager. So if for some reason we started a renewal last year, we never finished it, moved it all the way to the issued stage, it's going to be MIA. So that is why it's a good idea to keep kind of a backup expiration report to be able to catch things like that, because for some reason those will not pull into the Renewals Manager because it looks like they were never actually issued. I did have that one as an example here, and you can see that it is definitely not showing up in my Renewals Manager. If I clear my filter, we only still have the one policy for Bob and Sue test. So something to keep in mind, renewals service summary stage is pretty important. A lot of policies are going to have an endorsement on it at some point in time anyways, but that is something that you're going to want to keep an eye out for. Okay. I realize that we are getting very close to the end of our time and we have lots of questions. So for those of you who have questions, I will gladly hang around for, we won't go beyond the 3:15 mark. We'll go ahead and end it there. So if you're waiting to get your questions answered, I'm happy to hang around. I didn't realize we would have so many questions. So I just want to let you know that if you want to stay, I will continue that for a little bit. Okay, one more slide here for you, and then we'll get to all of our questions. Some things to keep in mind as you're getting ready to use this. Again, you need to know what stages you want to have before you go configuring. Your users are going to need to know what the stages mean and how they work. They're going to need to know all of these tools that we've just gone over. So how to customize your screen. What do you need to be looking for? When do you update the stage? Where do you update the stage? So all of those things are going to need to be rolled out and explained before you start working on this. Good best practice is to kind of keep this in conjunction with an expiration report just for the first couple of months on the user side, just so that they can compare and make sure that everything's coming in as it's supposed to be. And then after that, you really don't need to use the expiration report unless you're management or maybe a producer that doesn't even go into Epic. As I mentioned, you can get that expiration report to pull in the Renewals Manager stage, and those new reports include that stage as well. Couple of other things. There was one question earlier I promised I would answer. The reason why you have policies that are renewed but still showing up in Renewals Manager is because that Renewals Manager stage that they're in has not been changed to a renewed status or a renewed stage. My apologies. Those words can get real mixed up. Renewals Manager stage is not affected by your policy status. So that's why there's just a little bit of cleanup to start with when you get started using this. Those policies that you're looking at that are already renewed, you can highlight them all, actions, or right click them and update the renewal stage, or click your button and update your renewal stage and just change them all to renewed. And that'll take them out of your screen. And then of course, for personal lines, you might want to exclude renewed policies. Okay. So I will go ahead and take you through some of the questions now that we are right at 3 o'clock. Just a couple of things before some users might have to go. Just wanted to give you an idea of some of the things that we do offer as far as agency consulting is concerned. Feel free to reach out and connect with us on our website. Again, Elaine mentioned earlier that we will go through and send this to everyone in a couple of days. so you can come back and review it. We won't be sharing the presentation, but we will, the actual slide deck, but you will have the recording available to you. So without further ado, let's get through all of these lovely questions for those of you who want to hang out. All right. Question, can you add notes that show up in the Renewals Manager? I think that question's answered by the activity screen. However, keep in mind that that activity that you're seeing down in the bottom of the screen is on the expiring policy. So to go further into your actual policy that you might have started the renewal on, you will have to go to the current policies screen and access your activities for that policy. All of the policies that are in Renewals Manager are the expiring policies, so just keep that in mind. Any chance that account manager will be added as a field for column header? I wish I could answer that. I really do, but I have not been told yet. So I would assume, because that's a question that tons of people have asked, I would assume that that's something that Applied might have in the works, or it's probably a bright idea if you could check that out. I'm sure somebody's added a question in there that needs to be voted up. Let's see, is there a setting that allows renewals that are past expiration to show up? Yes, if you, and let me go back to that configuration screen. If you set your renewal process not started, or whatever your first Renewals Manager stage is, to display, up to 30 days after expiration or beyond, then that policy is going to stay there as long as it's in that stage. If it's moved to one of the other stages, it might stay indefinitely, or if you move it to one of the renewed or not renewing canceled stages, then it's going to drop out completely. So it's really not meant to look into the past, except for a short window of time where people didn't change that policy to the appropriate stage. Let's see. There is a way to do bulk renewals, which we would like to use for life and health policy. Is there a way to go back prior to 30 days to bulk renewal? I don't think so. No, there wouldn't be really a way to do that, because it's dependent on the policies, the stages that they're already in. You might be able to change the current configuration of the stage they're in. So if they're in a renewal not started stage, you could test this out, come here and configure this stage to go back further, because that's going to change all the policies in that stage. Identify your life and health policies, renew them, get rid of that stage and use a different one going forward, or change that stage going forward. So you could do that as a temporary process, but I don't see that, and that's very theoretical. That would be a test it out and demo first, see if it works, and then go over into production and see if you can do that. Another question, we've been using Renewals Manager for bulk renewals on non-downloaded benefits policies. There has been a problem with it not allowing us to renew more than one policy at a time, as the renewal dates will change when we move from policy to policy. We've called Epic on this, and we're advised that this is a known issue that has been worked. I just lost the question. Answered. Let me go back. Hold on. Hold on, let's see if I can find that again. We've called Epic on this. We're advised that this is a known issue that is being worked on. Am I aware of anyone else that's had that issue? I have not heard of anyone having issues with bulk renewing policies. That might be something you would jump on your Applied Client Network user group. That would be a great question to jump in there and ask if anybody else is having that issue. But it's like you said, it's probably something Applied's working on as a maintenance type update. But definitely reach out to your users and see if to whoever your local ACN group is, and see if anybody else has had that. So if you wanted to, next question. So if you wanted to start if you wanted to group commercial and personal, would you have renewal not started P and renewal not started C, so have them twice? If I would say that's a good question. If you were going to have the stages be totally different for the different departments, that's when I would use the differentiation of C or P. And I would actually put the C or P at the beginning, so it sorts those all together. Although you can change the sort anyway, so it's totally up to you how you want to do that, beginning or end. But I wouldn't. It's kind of like activities. Like I wouldn't create a separate renewal activity for commercial and personal unless the configurations were completely different. So commercial renewal with these tasks, personal renewal with these tasks. So that would be kind of my thought process there. If they're using the same thing, they use the same thing. Is there a way for all policies to show if policy has not been issued? We have policies that have not been issued, therefore we are using the Excel expiration report and we do not want to miss any policies. Yes, go get those reports from Applied, and I can't show it to you right now. We have a demo database, so it doesn't get completely updated with all of the things that come out right away. So get those reports from Applied. There are two reports. One is an in-process report and a submitted report. You can run that in-process report for all your policies in process, and you should be able to get a good idea of what you've got hanging out there with that. You could also run your expiration report and include the service summary row stage. Run that in Excel and you would be able to see it there too, and you can just kind of filter those out. So definitely either one or the other of those. I highly recommend running the in-process and submitted service summary row stage reports to kind of stay on top of that on a regular basis. Okay, got a little bit of time for a few more. Our office is currently having an activity or suspense entered when the renewals come in. Is there really a reason to do this when using the Renewals Manager? And isn't there a report to run daily to create an activity automatically for renewals? That is a very interesting question. So if an activity is coming in because it's a downloaded renewal, then that's something completely different. So that's to notify you that because the policy downloaded in Epic, you're getting an activity to say, hey, here's your downloaded policy. The other two processes are kind of separate, which would be there. You can run a report that would create an activity for renewals. I don't see that being very valuable now, as long as you're using the Renewals Manager, because using the Renewals Manager tells you, hey, here's all your policies coming up for renewal. You can go manage it from there and get your activity from there. And it's going to stay there until you start the process, change your renewal stages and things like that. So as far as the downloaded activities come in, those are totally separate. I would say that those are still helpful because they let you know, hey, my policy renewal just downloaded. And I can go address that, acknowledge it, and I know it's in the system. But yeah, running the report and creating activities automatically, not so useful anymore as long as you've implemented Renewals Manager. Okay, next question. I've got a few minutes left. A little bit of confusion about events. If the policy is renewed or canceled, why do we not want the stage to reflect that? It may not be valuable in this meeting, but the events discussion confused me a little bit. Okay, good question. So when you take the action of actions renew, that's what's doing the event over here in policy renewed or policy canceled. Remember, when you actions renew, that's going to take it off the expiration report. Well, if we actions renew and take it off the Renewals Manager, then that's doing the same exact thing that we had kind of the traditional way. Same thing with policy canceled. We might not want a policy to disappear once it's canceled because it might be a cancel and then a rewrite. So in that case, it would stay in Renewals Manager so that we can show that it's being marketed. We got the proposals, we got the quotes, and we're still going through that process. So that would be, I hope that helped clarify that question. We wouldn't really want Epic to do that for us, because once we do that action, we're still going to have a process that continues from there. That action is just the beginning of it, from the policy, and then you would continue the process from there. Good question. To filter by department in the renewals manager, do you need to first allow the supervisor to see others work under their employee file? Yes, absolutely. So you would have to give that person the ability to view others first, in order to, if you have that original filter here that says only filter renewals by view others. Otherwise, they should be able to view all employees. Supervisors would be able to view anything. They would just have to filter to that specific person or that specific department. Good question. My screen shows the policies. Okay, my screen that shows the policies does not have everything mine has. I have no go to policy button, no page of etc. Do these appear once we activate the renewals manager? Ooh, now that's a very good question. You may be on a prior version of Applied Epic. That's the only thing that I can think of with that. So if your agency is not taking the regular upgrades, if they're not cloud-based, they might be LAN. And so that would be something they might hold off on new updates until they're ready to update. I would contact your agency administrator, unless you are the administrator. And if you are, then go ahead and give Applied Support a call and find out why you're not seeing those on the Renewals Manager. There is no activation of Renewals Manager. It's just there. Good question. Okay, I'm going to do one more. We currently roll the policies forward in the manual process you mentioned in the beginning, and use the activity for comments and follow-up or tasks for future items. Is there an option to add an activity in the Renewals Manager process? Your activity, just as I mentioned earlier, would come from initiating the renewal on the policy screen. So actions renew, you get your renewal activity, and that's the one that you would use to follow up on from there. This one's going to show you historical activities on the expiring policy in Renewals Manager. It's not going to show you the new activities. You would go to the client's account to manage those. We had so many wonderful questions, and a few were not able to be answered during our webinar. We just decided that we would add on the responses to those questions here at the end of the webinar. So if you have hung around to watch the recording, I hope you are able to get your answers to your questions as well. So the first one I want to go with is, how do you recommend reducing the data entry in the system when using both the Renewals Manager and the Master Marketing Submissions? In both, you identify the stages, so it seems like it's duplicate data entry. Great question. So they are two completely different areas. The marketing submission area, where you're going to really dig into your marketing submission and your carrier submissions and what you've got going on with the quoting process. So the Renewals Manager itself is really meant to be a dashboard, so that you can just quickly see what the process is that the renewal is in, based on all of your renewals that you have coming up, not just the one. So your marketing submission is really going to be where all of the details are at, like we mentioned earlier, where the renewal activity might be as well. That's all going to be on the client account. So that's when you want to dive a little bit deeper into that. But from your Renewals Manager, you should be able to see things like marketing for rewrite. So if we just want to know that this is being marketed, then that's a good stage to put that in. Great question. Next one is, if modifying a stage and you continue, does it update all the renewals in Renewals Manager with the default stage, renewals not started, or does it just update those that are in the stage that you are modifying? So by default, any policy that is in that stage, when you make a change to that stage in Epic and configure, it will go ahead and update all of the policies that are in that stage. So Most of them are already in the renewals, not started if you haven't been using that stage. So they will all change accordingly once you make that change in configuration. And then, of course, any new policies that are entered in will also be in the new stage that you have created. Okay, next question is, can you show us what happens when you type marketing submission? I'm assuming that means when you click the marketing submission button. So I will go ahead and show you. So over here on our screen, you're going to see here, we click on the marketing submission for this policy. And when we click on that, it is going to take us into a new marketing submission. So when we get here, we are going to be starting a new master marketing submission. So from the top, you'll just begin that process, label it as you would, select the lines of business that you're going to be marketing, and then go into your detail to update and complete the application for all of the lines that you're going to be marketing out. Okay. All right. Next question is, does the service summary disappear once we start using this? It wasn't showing on my screen. So here in the Renewals Manager itself, you will not see the service summary row stage. That's going to be on the service summary in the policy itself. So if we access this policy, I'm going to go to policy, and we go to our policies list. Then at the bottom of the screen, you'll still see your service summary row stage as it is. So when I highlight one of the lines of business under the header, remember you have to click on a line of business in a package policy in order to see your service summary row. So once we highlight a line under the header, it's going to show you your service summary rows for that policy. And again, this is where we want to make sure that that original renewal line is not in process, because if it is, that policy is not going to show up in your Renewals Manager. Okay. For personal lines, next question. For personal lines, when you have excluded renewed policies, did you first have to default to the CSR filter? Yes, great question. So remember, in Renewals Manager or in any area of Epic where you find a search where field, you are able to compound that search. So here I would first search by the CSR, and you could do, first or second, either way, you're going to get the same filter when you put those two together. But if I came here and I went to the client service rep or client service manager, however you have that set up in your system, going to go with a begins with, and I'm just going to use a C. There may or may not be any information in here, just depending on who's on these accounts. Again, these are demo accounts. As I suspected, there's not anybody that's going to pull up. But once we select that, then you can go in here and select your renewed policies. It's going to default to exclude, and you would click find. Now, what that does, you'll notice when you hover over your search bar, you see now that we have the filter showing the client service rep, and you might put more of the name in, of course, and then also the renewed policies equal exclude. So what that does is that's using both of those filters together to give you the information that you need. So once you have selected both of those filters, you'd want to come over here and again, click on your filter defaults. It shows you what your view is and your two filters, and that's what you would use as default. So you check your box here and click on OK, and it'll save your preferences for each time you go into Epic. Good question. I'm going to clear that filter out so we get our data back here. So the next question is, if a producer uses this as well as an account manager uses it, who updates the information? Well, that is a decision that you have to make internally as an agency. Generally, the account manager is the one that's going to be working the account. They're going to be doing all of the things on that policy. Now, you may also have a marketing manager. If you have a marketing manager, then that person might be the one that's going to update all of those stages, just depending on what their role is in that marketing process. If the account manager is the one that's going to gather the information for the renewal policy or for the marketing process, they're likely the one that's going to put it in a discovery renewal stage. And then maybe once it is in the process of marketing, your marketing person puts it in the marketing stage. Producers generally don't change the stage, just in my experience, because they are really just looking to this for reference to see what's going on, what's actually happening with their policies, versus them actually changing those stages. Okay. Next question, can the number of items per page be increased or changed? Not necessarily. You do have this little line here in the middle. The information that shows up here is what is the number of items that it's going to show you, but you can change your view here and click on this little line in the middle and drag it down a little bit further. So it will pull in a few more items into your view here. Of course, it's going to delay on me a little bit, but if you drag that down a little bit more, then you should be able to see a little bit more listed there on your screen. I don't have that many policies. These are all demo policies, but if I did have more would list here in this screen. So it's all about your view really and what you prefer to see. You have the ability to kind of drag it down and see a little bit more, or pull it up and see a little bit less. All right, but some things unfortunately are just hard coded into Epic. So as of right now, no, there's no way to change that. All right, will a policy that is listed as migrated show in the Renewals Manager? Yes, it will. And so that policy, if it's expiring, it's based on that expiration date, it should show up in your Renewals Manager. I just had one recently migrate to Epic towards the end of last year. We used the Renewals Manager, and I still, take a glance at there every once in a while just to see how everything's going. And those policies will show up if they are in that migrated stage. Very good question. Where do you type your notes is our next question. Are we typing our notes on the renewal activity? Yes. So remember, this screen is showing you your expiring policies. It's really to see what the history is, what's happening on that renewal. And so in this screen, you're looking at what's happened in the past, except for the marketing stage, or sorry, not the marketing stage, except for the renewal stage that lists it there in that column. So all of this information is historical data. It's on what happened on the policy that it is expiring so that you know what you need to do on the renewal policy. So for example, if we had already started the renewal process for maybe this one here, then we would go to policy, and that's going to take us to that account. And once we get into the account, and go to the policies list. Of course, it's going to open up the application for you, but we'll click on policies to go to the policies list. That's going to show you here whether or not you've actually started the renewal. This one was a renewal that was non-renew in process. So we see that right there, non-renewal pending. And we haven't initiated the renewal on this yet. So in order to actually start the renewal from the screen in Epic, we'll have to click on Actions Renew. And once we do that, we could, of course, can update the renewal stage as well. But from here, of course, you want to update your information, update your issuing company if somebody is new there and you have that information. And then once you click on detail to go into the app itself, that's going to give you your activity. So we want to make sure we start the renewal from that expiring policy in order to get our renewal type activity. And that can be whatever it is that you have initiated from your policy. Here we go. So RENR, and that's where we would keep our notes for that renewal that's going on. Okay. And now, of course, that's on the renewed policy. So when you go back to your policy screen, you're going to see that here is your expiring policy and here is your renewal policy. The renewal stage doesn't need to be changed on the renewal policy. It's going to stay that until that policy expires. But you will continue to see on the Renewals Manager that stage as it's changed on the expiring policy. So this is the one that you're actually going to want to change your renewal stage on. Okay. Next question is, before we understood Renewals Manager, all were updated to renewed rather than left as Renewals Manager process not started. Might there be a simpler way to identify those that manually other than manually going through each one within a certain time period? So, of course, we can't talk in person. That might help clarify that question a little bit. If you are, if it's a process like for personal lines where we're just going to let that automatic renewal happen, we are going to make sure that those policies that have been renewed by download are excluded by using that filter to exclude renewed policies. So from a personal lines perspective, we actually don't need to change that stage because that's not our workflow. Those that are actually going to be touched for commercial lines or whatever department you're in that you're actually making all of the changes on those stages in Epic, those are all going to be manually changed. And the reason why is because the process is a little bit different. You're going to start with getting updated information for the client and processing that renewal and doing all the things. This is just one extra click to say, yes, I've renewed this policy. The process of updating a stage based on the fact that it is renewed in Epic, that configuration that we looked at earlier, that's a universal change. So right now, there's not a way to be more specific with, if this type of policy has renewed, let's remove it from the Renewals Manager. You could modify the days of that policy type if you wanted to base it on a policy type and set the days to show up in Renewals Manager to 0. Again, that's still not going to change the stage. So probably not the answer you wanted. Again, most of the changes that you wanted that need to be made on the Renewals Manager stage are going to be manual. So you can filter the ones out that have already been renewed in Epic, but everything else is going to be, yes, we need to go in and make sure we make the change to that stage. Okay, next question is, how do we turn on the option which automatically updates the Renewals Manager when renewal has downloaded or still reads not yet started instead of renewed? Same kind of answer to that question is you can exclude those renewed policies. So if we come here again and do renewed policies and exclude, that will take them out of your Renewals Manager once they have been renewed by download, but you cannot automatically update that stage without automatically updating all of the stages on all of your policies that have renewed. All right, next question is, what percentage of the agencies do you work with that use Renewals Manager? The answer to that is, my goal is all of them. So I try to help each agency that I work with implement the use of Renewals Manager. Not very often do I come across agencies that are already using it. I do every once in a while. Some folks have, tried to make some changes to the stages independently, have watched some of the great webinars that are out there to give some additional detail on that. But most often I'm actually helping implement this process within agencies. Okay. A couple of questions left. And the next one is, if you group by P, C, or EB, if it applies to 2 departments, would you put both codes in? If so, they really won't group together. Very good point. So if you wanted to, let's take a look at configuration of the Renewals Manager stages, just to kind of get a visual on how that would look. So if we wanted to take all of these stages and apply them to different type of departments based on that department specific stages that might be a little bit different, we would go in here to the Renewals Manager. And in that case, we would have to have all of these stages or a couple of these stages from one department and a couple from another department included in that list. So just thinking long term, that could be a very long list at some point. So if something is a universal type stage, just to keep it simple, you could keep it as renewals process not started and just have renewals process not started. But for those that are specific to each department, you could separate those out. So maybe you have all of your generic ones at the top and then group your others together by the letter. You, of course, could do the duplicates and say, C, renewal process not started, C, non-renewal pending, and then maybe P, renewal process not started, and P, renewal process not, or non-renewal pending. Just keep in mind that that's going to really make your list a lot longer if you do something like that. Again, it's completely your preference as an agency, and these things can definitely be modified and customized. So it would be something that I would have, more conversation internally to decide, is that how many we really want to have, or can we work with this? And some of you guys use the same stage, or whatever the case is. So definitely just would recommend having more conversation about that and with your departments, and say what works best for you, because it's really about what works best for your agency and their departments. Okay. All right, last question, last but not least, we are in the middle of a rollover. The carrier and policy number is changing on renewal. Ooh, that's fun. What is the best method to show it as renewed when it is a downloaded policy? Probably the same process as before. Once it reflects as renewed in your system, it should be excluded from the renewed policies if you're going to exclude those out of your Renewals Manager list. You likely might also want to, in your filter, let me just point this out here real quick. You may be able to change multiple policies at one time. Often I'll use this entered by column to see that the policy has been entered by download. And so if I know it's something that's downloading, I can probably go to those policies and see all of the ones that have renewed. Or you could maybe sort by your PPE if you know that certain ones that are within a PPE are all going to be automatically downloaded. So maybe you could take a look at some of the ones that had already renewed and highlight multiple at one time based on your comm log, and go ahead and change those to that renewed stage if you want to actually change the stage again. It's not entirely necessary for you to change the stage on those renewed by download policies if that's not going to be a part of your process. You do not have to change the stage. If you say, okay, for these type of policies for this department, small commercial or personal, you don't have to update the stage unless it is a manually renewed policy. If you're manually doing the renewal because it's surplus lines, brokered, or whatever the case is, then you have to update the stage on those. Otherwise, if it's renewed by download, just leave it in the renewals process not started. And again, use your filters to kind of filter out that information. So just keep in mind, you don't have to update the stage on everything. It is completely dependent on the department and how the workflow works for those users and what they are looking at specifically. Again, this is probably more driven towards commercial lines and those processes that are over an extended time period. Okay. Actually, one more question. The last question is, it looks like you can right click on a policy to add an activity. And yes, you can. I will right click right here, and you can certainly add a manually entered activity for that policy. Again, just keep in mind, this is the expiring policy. This is not for your renewed policy. So if we wanted to add a note on the expiring policy, like maybe this is being non-renewed, then we can add a note here. Or if we want to add a pre-renewal activity to say, hey, when this policy renews, the client wants us to requote because of X, Y, and Z. So that would be really where your thought process needs to be, is that this is the expiring policy. This is not the policy that is actually being renewed. Okay. So hopefully everyone got their questions answered now. Hopefully you all enjoyed the webinar. Again, thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you again in the future.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Great presentation. Thank you to everybody who joined us today. We do hope that we provided a really good starting point for you using Renewals Manager. Clearly, from all the questions, there's a lot of interest in this, so that's exciting. If you would like to learn more about KiteTech's IT and consulting services, please feel free to reach out using any of the ways we have listed here. We'd be happy to meet with you and just learn about your agency and how we can help. As we mentioned earlier, we will be sharing the recording with you in just a few days, and in that same email will include a link for our next webinar on Microsoft Teams. It's going to be another great presentation, so we hope you'll join us. Finally, just a reminder, please take a minute to complete our survey. We'd really appreciate your feedback. And thank you again for attending today's presentation. We hope that you have a great rest of your day.